Whether it's the common cold, COVID-19, flu, strep throat, or tuberculosis, or anything else, infectious diseases affect all of us at some point. And that's why the Infectious Disease Lab here at Austin Peay is so important. Welcome to 91.9 Public Affairs and APSU-TV. I'm Micah Terrell. And joining me today, two really important people that have helped us with that lab. Dr. Perry Scanlan, he's the chair of Allied Health Sciences, and Dr. Heather Phillips, she's the director of laboratory testing and assistant professor of medical laboratory science. Thank you both so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
So before we dive into the really interesting history of how the lab came about, let's talk about the infectious diseases that you're tracking. So obviously we've had a lot of influenza, both A and B, and of course new variants of COVID-19. What trends have you noticed and what other infectious diseases have you been tracking?
Sure. So we track both COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that we call it, in our Austin Peay community, but we also track it outside of our community, which is what Dr. Perry Scanlan does. At Austin Peay, we have seen a lot of trends that basically follow what we see, particularly with variants. So as variants continue to mutate, we start to see that the virus becomes more transmissible, and we see that transmissibility usually means that it can go from host to host or human to human better, so we see more infection. So as we see new variants, we see more infection is basically what I'm getting at. But in addition to COVID-19, we do track other viruses and other bacteria. So one of those would be influenza, both type A and B. We also track things like sexually transmitted infections such as gonorrhea, chlamydia, trichomonas vaginalis, which most people aren't familiar with. That's a parasite of the genitalia. We also track things like HIV in our community and hepatitis C. These things are really important to monitor because most people aren't aware, but Clarksville-Montgomery County has the highest rate of sexually transmitted infections in the state of Tennessee. We're also significantly above the national average for STIs, so it's really important to monitor that within our Austin Peay community. So in addition to that, we also track things like monkeypox. So monkeypox did affect us here at Austin Peay as well. We did have a few cases, but the reason why you didn't hear anything about it is because we were able to mitigate that transmission relatively quickly. We do have over 100 doses of the Jynneos monkeypox vaccine on hand at Austin Peay, and anytime that we had an infection, we were able to collect those swabs at the diagnostic lab and immediately get a result and then make the decision if we needed to do ring vaccination or not.
And the goal really is to prevent infectious disease. So, you know, we want to protect the public, we want to protect our students, so we have these vaccines and we do the diagnostic testing with medical laboratory scientists to make sure that we can protect the public, make sure we can catch those cases before they spread and become bigger issues. And that's really important for us in the public health sector to try to make people feel safe and also treat and prevent disease.
Definitely do. And talk to, because obviously we've done a lot of tests, and I'm sure you've tracked each one. Can you give us a rough idea, and I'm not sure if it be you, Dr. Perry Scanlan, or Dr. Heather Phillips, how many roughly you've done in the past year?
So we've done over 22,000 COVID-19 vaccines, and we've done over 5,000 of other types of testing as well.
Wow, that's great. And so if you're just tuning in here with us at 91.9 FM and APSU-TV, I'm Micah Terrell, and we're talking with Dr. Heather Phillips and Dr. Perry Scanlan all about APSU's Infectious Disease Lab and how important it is. Now, tell us, I know Heather, you're really instrumental in help. How did the lab come about here at Austin Peay?
Actually, that was Dr. Perry Scanlan's idea to bring it to the forefront. And then we received her funding from the government, correct? It was a grant. And we used those funds to basically build a diagnostic lab from the ground up. And so that's something else that medical laboratory scientists can do in the state of emergency, is that we have the availability to set up a laboratory. So we started a drive-through. and it prevented anyone who had a COVID-19 infection or exposure from basically being inconvenienced from having to come into the building, but it also kept everyone isolated so that we wouldn't spread disease. And the first day that we opened the COVID-19 testing lab, we had over 1,200 people show up. We were not expecting those volumes. And if you've ever been to the ARD building, you know the parking lot is relatively small. So the next step was to basically mitigate the flood of people that we had. And so our campus police and security were really instrumental in helping navigate that as the traffic would go down College Street, oftentimes people waiting. We were able to utilize the nursing students over at nursing on the academic side, and as well as our medical laboratory students to aid with testing. The nursing students would help with sample collection. We had phlebotomy students in our phlebotomy program as part of the allied health science would also come and helps do sample collection as well. And they would collect as many as 500 samples in a matter of 2 to 3 hours sometimes. I mean, it took volumes of our students here, both allied health and nursing, to collect those samples. But then it was left to our medical laboratory scientists to perform all the testing. And you may not be aware, but it takes about 3.5 to 6 hours, depending on volumes, to test 96 patients for SARS-CoV-2 or the COVID-19 infection. It's a lot of time.
And you know, we had to start with a dream, and that was the biggest part, is to have a dream, to be able to test and to be able to do things. And you know, it's hard because you need that initial startup to get going. And with COVID-19, the monies and funds were available from the state and federal governments to help facilitate this, to provide a function and safety for the students, faculty, staff, and community, really. And with that dream, we were also fortunate enough to have Dr. Phillips, so she was able to have the qualifications and experience necessary to do that. So it was a dream to produce the grant, to get the funding, to get the lab going, and then really Dr. Phillips that was able to implement those dreams into what we have now, and hopefully things that can service, you know, Austin Peay's community even more going forward. And we're really excited about the opportunities to not only prevent infectious disease, but to showcase what medical laboratory science is, what allied health is doing, and how we can facilitate and help the community.
And that's really interesting too, to see how the different disciplines have come together to help with that creation too. If you could share with us, kind of describe, because obviously we can't go in and see the lab, but describe for us and kind of give us an idea of what it's like inside the lab.
Sure. So the lab is like a diamond in the rough. That's the best way to explain it. So initially, the ARD building had this untouched space in essentially its basement. And so it was really easy to access from the back of the building, and it was actually a really perfect location because it wouldn't cause this cluster effect of students that were infected in the middle of campus. So it was a really great location. And when you walk in, it's like walking into a basement. But then all of a sudden, you see all the biohazard signs and wear gear, personal protective equipment when you enter the lab space. And it's a little scary for people who aren't familiar with that because you have to wear full gear because it is a molecular lab. So we do worry about contamination. So we wear gloves, we wear gowns, we wear goggles, we wear full N95 masks, and we have the option to protect our hair, whatever it is that we like to protect as well. And then you walk into the lab and it's white. I mean, it's white from the top to the bottom. We do have a HEPA filtration system that does circulate the air relatively quickly. It's about 400 square feet every 20 seconds. And we also have what we call biological safety cabinets, which maintain all of the samples. So we really don't have to worry about any of these viruses escaping into the air that anyone else is breathing. And also the air is filtered before it leaves the lab, so you also don't have to worry about any of that escaping into the environment as well.
Very cool
Yeah.
and very interesting. And I'm going to ask this because I'm sure a lot of people are like, how expensive was that to put all that together? Because I know that the medical equipment is not
Sure.
cheap. Can you give us a rough idea of how much and obviously money to
Yeah.
put that together.
Sure. So it really depends on what you're comparing it to. I think at the end of the day, the COVID lab was probably relatively inexpensive compared to many of the other labs that are out there. However, the reagents and the supplies and things like that that are required to maintain testing and medical laboratory science, we want to make sure that our testing is as accurate as possible. So down at the diagnostic laboratory here at Austin Peay, our accuracy is almost 100%. I mean, our error rate is extremely low, which is higher than the national average. So we are really proud of those numbers, and we do follow all of the medical laboratory scientists' basically our ethics with that. So we do quality controls, calibrations, validations, correlation studies, all of these things that probably don't mean a whole lot here on this stage, but at the end of the day, it basically contributes to that accuracy that we have that some other fields may or may not have. But that costs a lot of money to do those things.
And Heather, you know, it's about quality. That's the
Right,
key.
quality.
You have to produce results. We're talking about real people, real results, real impact on their lives. And so you can't just make a mistake every once in a while. You have to be very thorough and catch mistakes before they're actually done. And so it takes a lot of emphasis on quality control and verification and managing the system so that our results are right every time, each and every time that we do them.
Right, definitely very important. Quality and precision. Precision, that's what you do for sure.
Right.
So yeah, so we've talked about a lot. Please explain anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to tell the audience who's listening right now about the Infectious Disease Lab here at Austin Peay.
I think that it's available to students, faculty, and staff, and people that need to get tested. So please utilize it. Ask for the testing because it can be beneficial to your health. And we really are glad that we have the opportunity to do healthcare on campus for those students and faculty and staff. What do you think, Heather?
Yeah, we've expanded the lab services. So we were just an infectious disease lab. Now we're expanding into other testing, things like diabetic testing. So like A1Cs are something that diabetics are really familiar with. Glucose levels. People also may be familiar with urine testing. So things like urine cultures and do I have an infection? Do I not have an infection? What does my kidney look like, right? How well is it functioning? Also things like how well is my liver functioning? And all of these tests that you see that your general physician would probably order, we're going to be capable of doing down there at that lab. So we've been able to expand it to bring in additional resources, and that has not only been beneficial for the campus to have something so accessible. So instead of waiting anywhere from 1 to 5 days to get results back, you can have results within the hour. I mean, that has been a huge benefit in treating individuals. And you can imagine if someone were to have a disease such as chlamydia or gonorrhea or something like that, it's a very sensitive nature. People are very vulnerable when they come in for those diagnoses. But it also helps give the treatment relatively quickly so that they can get into a better frame of mind with moving forward. And it also prevents the spread of disease.
Very key.
Yeah.
Now, if anyone's interested in the medical laboratory science program, which obviously is a huge part of all of this, how can they get more information?
Absolutely.
Well, they can contact our departmental office in Allied Health Sciences. They can contact me, Perry Scanlan, in our office. Call us or email us at scanlanp@apsu.edu, and I'd be happy to talk with them about how great our medical laboratory science program is.
That's wonderful. And y'all, thank you so much for sharing that. And again, Dr. Perry Scanlan, who's the chair of Allied Health Sciences here at Austin Peay, and also Dr. Heather Phillips. She's the director of laboratory testing and assistant professor of medical laboratory science. Thank you so much for stopping by and taking time out of your very busy schedule, helping us all stay healthier. So we appreciate you. And I'm Micah Terrell with 91.9 Public Affairs and APSU-TV.